I've always seen women as amazing leaders because they take on traditional masculine roles like leading teams, but also take on board those feminine roles in their leadership roles. So things like compassion and empathy. And I think they make better leaders because of that. They're much more emotionally intelligent. So going into an experiment like that, right, that's all I've had in my environments was this kind of assumption, preconceived notion that women and men are equal, even financially. So when that conversation arose, crazy thing for me was I couldn't even understand her point of view on it. Every single date that I've been on, I always cover the first date, but it's not because I'm a man, it's because I've asked that person out and they've said yes.
So, what did you think of the finale?
This was so good. It was such a good season. I'm just sad it's over, really.
I don't feel like we got enough.
No.
Normally with Love is Blind, by the end, I'm kind of like fast forwarding through the episodes, but with Love is Blind UK, it was so well done. The cinematography was better, the sets were better, the quality of the cast was phenomenal.
Yes. And I mean, don't even get me started on the accents.
Oh, yeah. Can you do a British accent? Let me hear your best.
Oh, I mean, I do.
I think you should do it before our guest gets here.
Absolutely not. Don't make me look like a fool,
I
Erin.
won't. That's why we're doing it now. He won't know. Love is Blind is a reality show that I got sucked into in the pandemic. Here I was, all high and mighty, being like, I don't watch reality TV. I'm better than that. I'm elevated. How's that? Is that good?
It was pretty
No,
good.
it's terrible. And what happened in the pandemic is I got sucked into the show, and boy, do I love it because it's interesting to see. It's got such an interesting psychological twist that I love.
Mhm.
Basically, if you've never seen it, I don't know what rock you're under, but I'd love to go under it because once you've seen it, you can't not see it. And I want to go back to the life before reality TV. So please send me the address of your rock. But what it is 15 couples that are dating sight unseen. So they're in pods with audio so they can hear each other, but only we, the viewer, get to see what they look like.
Mhm.
And if they fall in love, they can propose, and only then, when they're engaged, do they get to see each other for the first time. And that episode of The Reveals is by far my favorite.
So good.
It's like when I was a kid and I thought, you remember Dave Rowe from Country 105?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God, his voice. I was like, this guy, he's going to be 7 feet tall with a six pack. No offense, Dave Rowe, we love you. That is not what Dave Rowe looks like. But it's like a shock to your senses when you find out what somebody looks like. I'm sure that's happened to longtime listeners of this podcast. We have a million listeners of this podcast, then we release our YouTube and people are like, oh, oh, whoops. Anyway, but imagine then being engaged to that. That would just be something else. So today, our guest is Tom Stroud. Tom, if you've watched the show, did fall in love on the show. He got engaged to a wonderful woman named Maria, and then they had to decide if they were going to make it to the altar or not. Ultimately, they decided no. So they stood up in front of friends and family, and what are they, like a JP, I guess?
Probably. Yeah. That's what I'm assuming. Yes.
Paid actor? I'm not really sure. But they say, we're now here to find out if love is truly blind. Do you, Tom, take thee, Maria? And you get to say, I do or I don't.
Uh-huh.
And it's quite an exciting moment for everybody. So Tom said, I don't. But most interesting, why we wanted to talk to him today is he and his partner didn't align on a number of things, including money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. I can't wait to get into this.
Yes, she believed that he should have paid for one of their dates, even though she offered, which I find interesting and manipulative, which is why I'm like, I get you, girl. I get you. I've been there. I've played those games. We're going to hear from Tom what it was really like, and also how to navigate these tricky conversations when you're in a relationship.
First, just tell us how you even ended up on the show. This is what I want to know.
I'll give you a little bit of background. So, yeah, I hadn't been in a relationship for about 6 years prior to being approached for the show. And was kind of caught in this like hamster wheel of London dating apps. No one really wanting to commit, everyone having multiple people they were talking to on the go at the same time. And my work circumstances, I'd just gone sort of freelance, gone into consultancy. So I was in a position where I could make a decision like that because my life was a little bit more flexible. And then literally out of the blue, got a DM on my Instagram saying, you look sad, single, and lonely. Would you like to try something a little bit different? And went through this casting process. Like my casting process wasn't as intense as some of the other cast because I was away in Bali for a few months. So I couldn't do a lot of the psych tests and that sort of stuff, which bit them on the ass in the end. But yeah, and then I got offered it. Absolutely, why not? Love the idea.
I think that is so true and so telling, because I've heard you say before that dating apps really almost ruin the dating experience because it's kind of got all these check boxes. So what is dating like right now if you don't have Love is Blind and you don't have the ability to kind of go deep and get to know people? Describe the landscape.
It's bleak. It's terrible. The problem is there's so much kind of choice, I guess. And like you might match with someone where you're like, we look like we align, physically, I find that person attractive. The stuff they've got on their profile, like I really buy into, they might have similar interests or similar work or whatever. And then you start talking to them, you might go on a date with them, and then someone else comes up while you're on the apps. And then you end up thinking, well, that person, I find myself slightly more attracted to. And before you know it, you're just in this mess where you're like, I don't even know what I want anymore. And so I guess my one outtake from the show is even with the apps, there's a way that you can use them in a bit more of a healthy way, which is just talk to one person at a time, right? And put all your intention into that person, because that way you're not constantly comparing them to someone else. And I think that's really important. And that's the amazing thing about the show, is that you have that intent. And I also speak to my friends a lot about this. When you're going on dates, go in there with intent and go in there being aware of your values and who you are and what you're looking for. And don't just go off like that person was a vibe and we got drunk and did the salsa in a bar. Because while that's fun, it's not how you're going to find your partner.
Yeah, I love that, because we always say the chemistry is built. And so when people are looking for chemistry, sometimes what they're looking for is a really toxic sexual attraction for one. And they're like, oh, I didn't feel the spark. I'm like, well, you can build something bigger than a spark. If you're looking for a spark, you're in big trouble. I always just went into dating going like, do I want to hang out with this person again? Yes. And it just sort of builds. And then you build a wonderful, wonderful relationship that has lots of sparks for a lifetime. But looking for it is a little bit dangerous.
This is it. And people get very preoccupied by that initial like lust, I guess I'd call it, where, and sometimes that's your own kind of when you're holding a mirror up to yourself and you're like, why am I looking for that more than the important stuff? And maybe it's because I'm a bit avoidant. Ideal world, you have a bit of everything, that would be my desire, because I suppose the sexual attraction thing is the difference between having a friend and having a romantic partner, right?
But I don't know. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone where there was lots of sexual attraction in the beginning and then you got to know them and you were like, ooh. Or the other way
100%.
around, where you're like, oh, I suddenly fancy my friend that I've known for a long time too. So yeah, the banging part really should be out of the equation until you've gone deep enough. But that's hard to say to a bunch of horny singles that are out there swiping left, right, and center. This is like a long time ago too, right? So it's over a year ago that you do this whole thing, and then you have to live your life in this complete secrecy for a long period of time. What we want to know what that was like. Are you constantly paranoid about what you're going to put on Instagram? Do you have to be in contact with your partner that you've said no to sort of align on, do we post this or do we not post this?
It was far easier for the single cast members post weddings than it was for those that were married. So Ben and Nick and Bobby and Jasmine, they had to keep their relationship secret. And they were in a position whereby some of their families didn't even know that they were married, and they weren't allowed to know that they were married for a year. Ben's granddad would be like, my boy, how's your romantic life going? He'd be like, I don't know, Dad. I don't know, Granddad. Bit awkward. For me personally, like, and for the rest of the single cast, it was okay. There was no pressure to stay in touch with people or any of that stuff. I fell very easily back into my old life again and really enjoyed. I have a great life. I'm really proud of what I've built for myself. So when it actually came out, it was like, oh God, I'm not sure I want this to happen anymore. I'm really good. I'm really happy.
You get engaged and then the show's throttled, meaning they don't show everything all at once. So did you have a bunch of people reach out to you and go like, what, you're engaged and now you have to lie for a few weeks? How did you handle that? Do you want more? I know you do. Why wouldn't you want more?
More what? What do I want more of?
More of this. Come hang out in the online course for Get the Hell Out of Debt. The link is in the description. You just got to click it, sign up, and we'll see you in there.
You cannot say anything to anyone when the show's going out. You're under these like heavy NDAs, understandably so, because 16 million people are rooting for you. They want it to work out. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's really lovely. But, that happened a year ago. And so I've since applied for the convent and I'm going to be a nun. So yeah, sadly, it's not going to work out.
There's no way. This must have been actually really good for you from a dating perspective. You must have people sliding into your DMs that aren't producers.
Yes, to answer your question, it's overwhelming and it's really flattering and that's nice. But the thought of dating right now is just, it's the last thing that I want to be doing, because life is pretty crazy and my brain is very all over the place. And so I think at the moment it's just time to kind of ride the wave and then also make sure that I'm constantly reminding myself of who I am.
Did you also get a lot of negative feedback? And what was that like? People sending you the nasty notes?
Yeah, I got a lot of stick around the wedding in particular. There are a couple of comments that I made on the show, which, like, watching them back, I was like, oh God, that was really ugly. And I've done a lot of reflection on that, particularly the sort of stuff around being judgmental around Maria's job. If you think about it, it's quite cathartic to have an experience like that where you can reflect on your own behavior. That was one thing which I got wrong, and I've been able to reflect on it. And I suppose that's a good thing, really, because I've learned a lot from it around my own judgment and bias and that sort of stuff. But the wedding in particular was difficult because you are sadly at the whim of Netflix in terms of how they want to edit it. And that was the way that they chose to edit it, was me kind of jilting her at the altar when the reality was, the truth come out now. There was a mutual no from both of us. I did get a lot of heat from that. But I think just naturally speaking, when you have two people that are from completely different environments, religions, that ends up becoming a very polarizing thing. And you're either like a team Tom or a team Maria. And there was a few days prior to the reunion where it was hard to deal with. And anyone who says that they don't care about what other people think is a liar. People just naturally do. It's part of human nature. Stephen is going through the same thing at the moment post reunion, and it's not for me to comment whether or not his actions were right or wrong, or Sabrina's actions were right or wrong. But the only thing I would say is, like, I have a lot of empathy and compassion for him because I've been there and I know what it's like.
Yeah. And Keri and I used to work in television and we're producers. So while we're watching through the lens of a viewer, but we're also watching through the lens of an editor. And we're like, oh, I see what they did there. Ooh, this is a bad edit. So we have a lot of compassion, the two of us, for what it must have been like. However, we've never been on that side of it, so we wouldn't know. What we wanted to really get into with you today, which is one of the reasons you're so here, is I thought you handled this so well. And then in talking with my friends who were horrified at how you handled it, I thought, oh, this is a good discussion. And that is that when you and Maria, your fiance, you'd met, you were engaged, you were going out on a date, there was an incident where she offered to pay for something and you said, sure. And later it turned out that wasn't the right answer. She had certain beliefs or patterns in her life previous where there was an expectation that you should pay. So it created a great conversation. It was a week of my life I got to spend fielding all these different conversations with all these couples, which was so awesome.
Mm.
But I really want to know what actually happened. How did it happen? How did it come out? And then how did you determine that maybe there was a difference in beliefs around money?
I really don't want to throw Maria under the bus at all with this. So I'll try and talk in more general terms about it. We obviously come from very, very different environments. And the way that I was raised, I mean, I was raised by a single mum, right, who had to imbue both those sort of feminine and masculine traits growing up because she was a homemaker and a caregiver, which are traditional feminine traits. And then she had to go out and work once me and my brother were old enough. So she sort of instilled this belief in me that women can have both of those traits and can be entrepreneurial and can create wealth and can be ambitious in the workplace, but also take on those feminine roles too. And then in my kind of adult life, and again, I want to be really, really clear that you are a product of your own environment. But, I work in PR, advertising, I've been surrounded by women my whole life who are very, very inspirational, who disregard the idea of a patriarchy, who have these leadership roles. And so for me, I've always seen women as amazing leaders because they take on traditional masculine roles like leading teams, but also take on board those feminine roles in their leadership roles. So things like compassion and empathy. And I think they make better leaders because of that. They're much more emotionally intelligent. So going into an experiment like that, right, that's all I've had in my environments was this kind of assumption, preconceived notion that women and men are equal, even financially. So when that conversation arose, crazy thing for me was I couldn't even understand her point of view on it. Every single date that I've been on, I always cover the first date, but it's not because I'm a man, it's because I've asked that person out and they've said yes. So I feel like I have a responsibility to cover the date. But for me, it's a really lovely gesture if we go out for dinner and then we have a drink afterwards. If the woman then pays for the drink afterwards, I actually really appreciate that. And it would make me wince a little bit, I think, if I went on a date and we went for dinner and drink and the woman didn't even acknowledge that I'd paid. I think there is an expectation. And this is the point I'm trying to make, is that there are people that have been raised in completely different environments who have a completely different expectation. And what a crazy eye-opening experience for me that I'd never met anyone like that before because I live in London and I operate in this bubble.
what I thought was interesting was I'm not throwing anybody under the bus either. I love her. I adore her. I think she's amazing.
Yeah, me too.
And at the same time, what's cool is she did what I used to do. I was raised in an environment too where the men paid and all of that. That has shifted for me completely in a really beautiful way. But that was how I was raised. And I noticed she did this classic feminine test that we do sometimes as women, where we know the outcome we want, but we're going to ask it as if it's a question. Keri's nodding. It's terrible. It's so manipulative. And I don't mean it in a conscious way, but I used to do that where I'd be like, oh, I'll offer to pay, but let's see if he lets me pay, because that will tell me something about him, which is horrible. And I'm ashamed to admit that that's how I behave. But I felt like maybe something like that was kind of what happened, because she did offer, which I think would then have been confusing for you because you seem like you're somebody who takes people at their word. And so was there anything there where it was a bit confusing or twisty or whatever?
The ice cream incident, if we want to call it that, for me, it was actually, I need to hold a mirror up to myself there, because when she paid for her own ice cream, my view was it's just a ice cream. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even think about the financial contribution of what it meant. And actually, I think for her, it meant a lot more because we were in that courtship phase. And so she was like, in that phase, I feel like the guy should pay. But on the other side of the coin, personally, I'm someone that communicates a lot. And I just don't think I would have ever said, I'm going to get this. I would have said, like, my expectation is this and that. She said, do you want me to get this for my ice cream? Because I'd already paid for hers. And I was like, sure. I didn't even think about it. She kind of got a bit mad about it.
Okay, well, Tom, let me just apologize on behalf of women, because that's something we do unconsciously. we test. It's a very, very feminine trait. And I know lots of women are listening right now and they're like, oh, I do that to my husband. You almost set him up to see, it's like you're kind of pushing to see, is he strong enough or will he do the thing that I want him to do? And for women listening, we really have to be conscious of that. We have to be really careful of that, because it's not the truth. If the truth is that you want him to pay for the ice cream, then that conversation needs to be had in a really honest way. Nobody benefits when you set somebody up. We don't want to ever set our partners up to fail. As soon as we start to do that, it's manipulative. And I used to do it. So I'm coming at you saying, I've done this before. And I've done it with other things too, like doors. My husband, as everybody knows, does not hold doors. And it's not that he's not a great gentleman. He's the most wonderful husband. Doesn't cross his mind because his mom, feminist, opened her own doors their whole life.
Right.
But I would sometimes just stand there with the door closed, like just standing there like, why aren't you opening the door? To test him. And it was so messed up, and it had a negative effect on our relationship until I really learned what is true and what is honest about this. And if I ask him to meet my needs, he always does. But I have to be clear about what those needs are.
Absolutely. And this is a far bigger conversation around communication and relationships, and not being afraid to communicate what you stand for and what you think's right. And I think it's really unusual that someone might say their partner through a test rather than just being very honest. And the same comes the point of this podcast, right? It's about money and communicating around finances. And people find that very awkward and might talk in spades or talk in ulterior language about it, when it's like, just be very, very clear about what your perspective is.
Yeah. In the pods, did you have conversations about money with Maria and Tasha, any of the other women you dated?
This sort of ties into my earlier point, really. There is this stigma around talking about money. And if I'm honest with you, you're dating for 10 days, right? And even in those 10 days, the earlier part of your dating days, you are spending 8 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes with that person. So, of course, it's so important to talk about this stuff, important stuff, values, finances, all that sort of stuff. But you also want to like have fun, because that's the point of going on dates, right? You don't want to go straight in being like 50-50 your provider. And they're like, hi,
Do you
I'm
have
Tash.
chlamydia?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, no, I got rid of it last week. I'm going on a TV show. It's fine. So that's the thing. With that experience, you really want to balance like having rapport and banter. And even, I spoke a little bit in the pods about having that sort of slightly more intimate sexual connection with people. Like, you want to explore that a little bit as well. And it's really hard to do that when you're not with that person. So money comes up, but in very, very shallow terms. And there's a conversation that you see with me and Maria on the show, which is about being a provider, raising a family, all that kind of stuff, where I sort of air my views about wanting to spend as much time as I can with my kids, if I ever have them, and her views around, being a stay-at-home mum. And the edit that you see is a very, very short excerpt of that conversation, but that was a conversation we had at length, and we actually came to a bit of a compromise with that. But
where did you land on that? I'm curious, because that is a common thing. We see that a lot in Americans. women have this understanding, I'm going to university to find my husband, and then I'm going to raise the babies at home and not use this education.
Right.
And so we see that a lot, but it's sort of like this unspoken expectation, which again gets really dangerous. So just out of curiosity, where did you land? Because more and more men are realizing, hey, I really want to be an involved father. And there is a financial decision that sometimes needs to be made.
So, I mean, my dream scenario on that has always been like, let's both work, but work less so that we can split the childcare. And I still firmly believe that it's probably more natural for a mum to spend more time with a kid than it is for the dad. Like, I think that's biological, right? But I'm also informed by my own experience as a kid that didn't have his dad around. And I remember when I was younger thinking, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to be the same person my dad was to me. And as I've gotten older and done a shitload of therapy and self reflection, I now feel like the opposite. And I want to be the father that my dad never was. And a big part of that for me is I don't want to be slogging my guts out 60, 70 hours a week to spend half an hour with my kids before bedtime, even if I manage to get back home in time. And so, yeah, my dream scenario would be cutting down my hours and maybe doing 4 days a week. And yeah, my partner maybe doing 1 or 2 days a week as well.
You can't see this, but Carrie's holding back a tear right now. I could just tell. She was like, the
Good.
father I didn't have.
I'm okay, Tom. I'm okay.
Okay, good. Do you want a tissue?
Yeah, I might need one, please. Yep, as usual. Because of this experience on the show, do you think that it's changed how you'll approach dating then and the conversations that you'll have with women as you go find your person?
100%. I mean, it's taught me so much about compatibility when it comes to finding a partner. And even on the journey, so there were like 3 stages to this. When I went into Love is Blind, I thought it was all about that intangible connection, the thing you can't put your finger on, all that kind of stuff. People talk about this. It's like a fantasy, right? It's like, oh my God, you just fall in love, like Prince Charming, fall in love forever after. And it's not that at all. That's a little part of it. When I went on the show, one of the other guys in there, Benaya, who's now happily married to Nicole, he was like my therapist in it. And what we kind of freshed out at that time was the right person for you is the person that it's not about those 5% of time where you're having amazing times together, going on nice holidays, doing cool shit. It's the person that makes the mundane 95% of your life more exciting. And I think that's really important. But to answer your question, you also need to have alignment in lots of things, and particularly around your values and your finances and your goals and your ambitions. And what I've realized is that I was incredibly judgmental about Maria's career, and I do really regret that. But my goals and ambitions in my life, I want to travel as much as I can and see the world and have those experiences. And I need someone that has a similar level of income who can afford to do those things with me, because I can't afford to pay for that person to do those things. So I know that now, and it's really good. It's a really good filter for me moving forwards.
If Maria had said she was a doctor and then you judged her based on that, nobody would be on you about judging for the career. I think it's partly because of the type of career she did and the fact that you were like, oh, I didn't understand it. I didn't know it. I made a judgment about it, whatever. But people are really on you about that. And you do such a good job in your defense of really being like taking ownership of everything, which is the key wealth building component. Even if something isn't your fault or isn't related to you, but it's part of an experience you were part of. If you can own it, then you can change it, right? So I think that's so cool. But that was her job, and you had some ideas about what that was like, and you were honest about that. Do you feel like you should have got the heat you got for that?
It's really important to reflect on your own flaws, I guess. And I have a lot, and that's something that I've gotten used to. To answer your question, I shouldn't have made a judgment without. There's a really good Carl Jung quote, which is about thinking is difficult, and that's why people judge, right? It's impossible to go through your life and not make judgments because you cannot interrogate every single thing that you think. Imagine how exhausted you'd be. And in that moment, I was like, well, that's a reaction, just the same as, I don't know, when cavemen were around and they saw a lion coming up to them, they wouldn't think like, oh, that lion looks friendly. His nails are really manicured. Maybe it's a friendly lion. You're just like, fucking lion, run.
Yes.
I do really regret it, but you're right. I mean, the people that I was talking about environments earlier, the people that exist in my environment, the people that I work with, the people that I know in London have all been like, why are you apologizing for that? Everyone judges people in London for what jobs people do, It's a big
Yeah.
part of life.
Yeah, we call it like first thought, second thought. First thought is always judgment, but your second thought was never shown. You didn't get the time for it to breathe. It was sort of like, this would be a great clip. And maybe that's because Keri and I are former producers. So I'm curious about, did you have a specific producer for you and Maria for some of the show? Like somebody following you around, helping craft this storyline? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so each couple had their own crew. And so you have 5 people that are just hanging with you day and night. It's crazy. Of which one's a producer. Obviously, you get a couple of like camera people, someone who's doing your interviewing to camera and all that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting. Looking back on it, like, I should have seen some of the not red flags, but you do notice some of the things where like they're just poking you around a specific storyline. And I remember on our wedding day having 3 hours of shots of, can you look sad walking along the mirror? Can you look sad in the bar? And every single question was like, so why did you decide to break it off with Maria? And I was like, I didn't decide. It was a mutual decision. But then they get the line that they want, and you're like, in
Yeah.
retrospect, I wish I hadn't said that. So
I knew it. I feel so vindicated because that's exactly what I would do if I was the producer. I envision the storyline going like this. I just got to get him looking out the window wistfully
Yeah.
and this, voiceover over here. Prior to you guys meeting, are they ever kind of helping you? When you're like, oh, I'm trying to decide Tasha or Maria, the producer's like, Maria's really great.
no, honestly, I mean, this is one of the credits of the show. They don't get involved at all in your storyline. They let you just figure it out yourself. But I mean, the crazy thing is, because you're doing all these interviews to camera all the time, it's like self-therapy. You're talking through your thought process, but they're asking you to externalize it. And that's pretty crazy because sometimes the shit going on in your head should not be externalized.
Yep.
Did you have to bring the same outfit? Because we saw a lot of those like 2 camera things where you're wearing the same clothes, but I was like, this was definitely shot on a different day. His eyebrows are wonky in this one. Did you have to have a continuity
Yeah.
outfit?
Do you know what? Embarrassingly enough, I'm wearing my continuity outfit as we speak. And that wasn't deliberate, but honestly, I need to wash it because it's been years.
There are a couple things I want you to consider when you are dating and you're trying to figure out if you're financially compatible with someone. The very first thing I want you to do is observe. Are they paying with credit cards when they pay? Not that there's anything particularly wrong with that. I mean, I guess in time, you're just looking for patterns. Are they consistently paying with various credit cards? Are they splitting up payments over, a couple different pieces of plastic? And all of these things aren't meant as a way for you to judge them. They're just meant as a tool for you to open up a conversation and be like, how do you feel about credit cards? How do you feel about carrying credit card debt? Those kinds of conversations can be had really early on in a relationship without you prying into somebody's personal life. As you get to know each other better and as your dating progresses, I want you to save for something together. Something mini, like maybe a mini weekend or a holiday or something that requires both of you to regularly and consistently put aside money. What you're looking for here is simply just a pattern, consistency, something sort of stable and reliable. There's not like some wild last minute holiday being borrowed on a line of credit and then, the car's being refinanced. You're just looking for calm, stable, and then also, of course, you need to be modeling calm and stable money behaviors also in order to make sure you're attracting a partner who's on the same wavelength as you. The third thing that I want you to consider is not necessarily how much money your partner spends on you or how much you're spending on your partner, but what you're looking for is the spirit of generosity. It's not about the number. It's about the spirit of generosity. And it's not about the dollars. It's about the spirit of generosity. That can show up in different ways that aren't necessarily money related. So how does your partner treat people who have less than? And how does your partner treat people who have more than? I want you to ignore any status symbols because those have no indication as to whether or not somebody is financially secure. Sometimes it can mean people have a lot of debt, right? If somebody's got a big fancy car that they pull up in, it could mean that they've got payments up the wazoo. What you're looking for is not brand name, flash, things that might be impressive to people on the outside. What you're looking for is the character of people on the inside, and that can show up in the details. So the clothing might not be, let's say, a particular brand name or a certain fashion brand, but what can show up is the details, like does it have holes in it? Are there threads everywhere? Or do they take care of their items that they do own? Do they have respect for the things that they do own? And do they treat them well? That's what you're looking for. And then the last one is to just really allow room for growth. Your partner today is not going to be who they are in 20 or 40 years. So we have to love our partners as they are now and also love them for who they can become. We have to allow room and create a big enough container for them to grow and for us to grow. whether you grew up with a strong maternal figure who modeled equality for you, or whether you grew up with a more traditionally patriarchal expectation like I did, you're going to create your money goals together as a couple, and you're going to create your money story together with a blend of both of your experiences. So let's not test our partners, and let's not set them up to fail.
Are you glad that you did this now that you've got hindsight and this is behind you a long ways? Can you look back on it and be grateful for this whole experience? Are you glad that you did it?
So if you'd asked me that question a week and a half ago, Kerry, I would have said absolutely not. It was a really difficult time because you're just getting so much heat and it was tough. But looking back on it now, after the reunion episode, I got this outpouring of love because I was so apologetic, maybe too apologetic. But people were like, yeah, he can own his shit. And, you know, you can't say the same about every member of the cast, I guess. So yeah, now it's been amazing and it's thrown up some really cool opportunities. And without meaning to get my high horse too much, I know some of the other cast are kind of well into the sort of lifestyle influencer thing and showing off about makeup and fashion and that sort of shit. I want to use this platform for good as much as I can. And I've done loads of podcasts around male mental health and self-worth and modern masculinity. And that's the thing that excites me, I think, because it gives me a lot of purpose. And selfishly speaking, it makes me feel good about myself.
And you've had a good sense of humor about it too. You're really good at poking fun at yourself, and you're really good at really understanding what this is. None of this has any meaning, and you have a choice to give it meaning or not. And so that part's been so cool to watch, that evolution of you. I am one of those people who, the minute the cast was announced, I went and followed y'all on social media before the first episode even aired. So I was like trying to get into all the personalities and trying to figure out all the things ahead of time. Mostly I was trying to figure out who gets married in it. Keri will tell you I spoil every season for her. So I'm like, oh, these people are married because
Tom, she goes and looks people up. She is looking at marriage certificates. She is digging.
listen, Dallas County had those public records. Okay. So I just was looking.
I know that you can find it. I'm just saying, why would you ruin it, Erin? That's all. Just go with the flow.
Well, because like, again, I wanted to watch it through those production eyes, right? And
Yeah,
really just kind of see, oh, how did they get to where they got to or whatever.
Did you nail it? Did you call the right couples?
I was very close. There was one couple that I thought was going to say no. They said yes and eventually broke up. So I called that. But again, that's just luck. We only see part of it, right? We don't see the whole thing. And so it's so easy to be on this side of the screen and be like, oh, that couple's terrible. I mean, they might have a ton of fun together, but you just get the right combination of moments stacked together and then they look completely unhinged. I know that you're mates with a lot of the guys from the show, but who are your favorite people in real life? Who are the people who you think in real life are just so cool on a level we wouldn't understand as a viewer?
So Ben is the most morally astute man that I've ever met in my life. Sometimes he scares me because I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to say something which he doesn't agree with, and that means that I'm going to go to hell. He's amazing. And even he got heat for how he dealt with Sam at the mixer thing because people were like, he was too confrontational. And I was like, he had every right to be confrontational. It's crazy that people are saying that, but it just goes to show how polarizing the internet is. But Steve and Ollie are two guys that have also had some heat as well. And, you know, like I said, I try and keep my head completely out of the storyline and what I think about their relationships. And I'm just judging them purely off. I think a good mark of friendship is when the shit hits the fan, who are the people that are still there for them? And they were both great for me.
What happens when all of these other reality shows come knocking next now?
I'm too old for that shit. I can't be walking with my dad bod, walking up a beach, seeing my ex, you know? No, we'll leave that to Freddie, that stuff.
Okay, in all seriousness now, as we kind of wind this down and let you go back to your real life, when you look at your 90-year-old self, you're married, you're happily married, that wrinkly old raisin of a person beside you, what are their characteristics and what are they actually like? And what kind of things have you gone through together?
Wow, what a big question. Kids is the first thing. And like I said, I wasn't massively keen on having kids 5-6 years ago. And if I'm honest with you, I'm getting old now and I don't want to be an old wrinkly dad. I don't want to be a 90-year-old dad lying on my deathbed with an 18-year-old kid. So no, it's not a good look for anyone. But kids is definitely part of the plan. But I've always spoken, and even on my little casting card right at the start of this, I've always spoken about having a non-traditional life. And I don't want to pass any judgment on people that do have traditional lives. But for me personally, like the idea of having like a 3-bedroom semi-detached house in like suburbia and driving a Toyota Yaris to work every day is just not what I want to do. I've always sought to have a bit more flexibility, and you know that might mean splitting my time between 2 different countries because I mean it's already basically winter here in the UK, and it's so somebody that probably has that similar mindset to really push their boundaries a little bit and not just go along with what society expects you to do and have those life markers and chalk them off like a checklist and then die.
Hey, we can't let you go without asking about the kiss with the lipstick. I mean, that's an iconic now moment in Love is Blind. Is that something that you look back on and you're like, who cares? Like, that was sexy. Or are you like cringing when people bring that up?
Hey, look, I'm flying the flag for more feminine qualities in men, right? So that was the cherry on the cake. I was like, if I was looking at that from a PR point of view before the show, I would have done it deliberately. Didn't make me feel emasculated at all. I was quite happy with it. If there are any lipstick brands listening out, I'm happy to do a little brand deal.
Everybody, you know what? Erin can't even help herself. She can't even help herself. We said goodbye to Tom, but before we did, Erin went full mom mode on Tom. This just proves that we are little old ladies that sit at home eating our bonbons whilst watching Love is Blind. But then Erin is like, I've got some advice for you, Tom.
I did. I just care about them. Well, I care about all of them, as people. I don't see them as the comments online about how these people get treated, and they're human. They're like everybody else. They're on a journey like everybody else. But I think he has a big career in front of him, and I think he needs to have his own podcast. And so I told him. Like,
well, he's so well spoken and he is very handsome.
but what's cool about him is I'm sure we could have had a 3-hour conversation. I was trying to be really respectful of his time because he's so fascinating and he's got a lot of really cool views. And I think it's so cool to see men shift in this way. It's one thing for all of us to sit here and demand we want equal pay, we want equal wealth, we want equal opportunity. But for men like him who are like, yes, absolutely. And also, let me show you all of these characteristics I have.
Yeah.
That balance it out in the other way.
The other thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that when we watch these reality shows, reality people is used so loosely because it is so one-sided and so produced. And this guy's got dimension and there's a lot more to him than what we saw. And just the fact that Maria was also going to say no. She was also going to say no, but we didn't see that because we saw him say it first. And so we can't make people the villain. So all of you keyboard trolls that go online and write stuff, I know those aren't our listeners, but those people that do, you need a little perspective first.
Here's the part where I'm really cautious because as he was talking about that, and I'm thinking, he did get an unfair edit, blah, 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 blah. I was thinking if I was the producer, I'd have made the same call.
Same.